Hey, this is James, the founder of Sweetfish Media. If you've listened to B2B Growth for a while, you probably have an idea of what we're passionate about. Loving people really well, a constant pursuit of learning, and inspiring people to own their careers. With all the craziness happening with this virus, we are incredibly fortunate to be in the business of podcasting. So many B2B brands are looking for alternatives to their in-person events that are being canceled, and our business is growing as a result. Please don't mishear me on this because I'm not saying this to brag. It is heartbreaking, the economic impact this is having on so many businesses. But being in the business of podcasting, the demand for what we do has increased. And because of that, we're looking to hire really talented people to help us serve that demand. So if you like what we're all about at Sweetfish and you're looking for a great career opportunity, hit us up. There's a link in the show notes where you can apply today. I'm really looking forward to meeting you.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. My name is Lesley Crews. I'm one of the producers here at Sweetfish Media. Today is another episode in the Behind the Curtain series where we share some of the things we're learning and how we're growing here as a team at Sweetfish. Today, we're joined by Logan Lyles, our Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish. Logan, how are you doing today?
I am doing awesome. All things considered, it has been a crazy few weeks. Who knows what sort of craziness will be around us by the time this episode airs. But, right now we're a few weeks into everything kind of going on around us. And it's been interesting. We've got customers that have been canceling events and some people pushing off the launch of their podcast, other people doubling down on digital channels like their podcast because of everything that's going on. It's just really tough to say what's going to happen from day to day. So we're just trying to roll with it and show empathy and grace to our customers and our team members. We're all kind of coping with this differently, but I'm no worse for wear and having a pretty good day and excited to do a new Behind the Curtains episode with you and kind of share more voices with listeners of B2B Growth. So appreciate you teeing me up today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I totally agree with you that we don't really know what's going to be going on whenever this episode goes live, of course. But I think that's what's so great about digital right now is, even with things happening in the world and, people having to cancel events due to this virus, I think that a lot of people are putting more emphasis into their digital assets. And I think that's really great. Just with even what we're talking about today, I know you've been sharing a lot with our team lately about video production and what a huge role that video can play when you're strategizing for the podcast that you're producing. A lot of people hear the word podcast and instantly they think about just the audio. They don't think about video firsthand. So why would you say that video is so important in a podcast strategy?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And for folks that have maybe followed along with my content or this show have probably, heard me say, like, don't just do video for video's sake. Because, some people are like me and they associate podcast, okay, it's an audio only show. And for the vast majority of the shows that we produce and B2B Growth, they are audio only, or at least audio first. And we have always said, like, you don't want to do just video for video's sake. And we're going to kind of break down a little bit further in the conversation what that means and what you should do about it. But I do think that one of the things we've thought a lot about is, podcasts do have kind of a discoverability challenge. There are some very interesting things happening there. For instance, you can now get the Google Podcasts app on iOS. It's no longer just an Android option. So I think that's going to be very disruptive and that's an encouraging thing for podcasters out there answering that discoverability thing. But what we've seen is that, social media is obviously, depending on your sector, it might be LinkedIn, might be Twitter, might be Instagram. You probably have your primary social media channel to engage with folks for brand awareness and some lead gen. And then you have the podcast over here, and audio only doesn't always translate well to social. And where we see video kind of bridge that gap between your engagement on social and driving people to podcasts where they might not necessarily be, when they're scrolling their social media feeds, ready for just audio only, which is kind of why I've never been a huge fan of putting a lot of emphasis on doing audiograms for your show. So we're going to talk about some alternatives to that, but it really kind of centers around bridging that gap oftentimes between social and your audio only podcast, where people do hang around longer, listen longer, stay subscribed, listen to most of the episodes that you put out more so than on other channels. But there's kind of a gap that you need to bridge between social and the audio content sometimes, and video can play a big role in that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love what you said about discoverability being such a huge asset, especially in our, our digital age on social media. I think it's so important. I know one of the things that you mentioned before was how people can often get video wrong when they're utilizing it alongside their podcast. What would you say is the main area people struggle with video, and why would you say that is?
That's a really good question, Leslie. And we're going to be talking about some ways that we've seen some good results with video, but I think it's worth talking about just a conversation I've had with so many customers and so many marketers who are thinking about their podcast strategy. And they kind of have these visions of, well, if we do video, it's got to be amazing. And I've seen these shows that kick off and they have these full video studios, or they're shot on a stage and it looks like a Netflix documentary. And the problem there, especially for B2B podcasting, is that it's very hard to sustain that. I've seen shows with very, very high video production value and good audio production value, but they're not able to stay consistent. And I think part of the reason we've been able to grow and sustain an audience here on B2B Growth is that we've just been unwaveringly consistent. A lot of that is kudos to James and the team in the early days, long before me. But, we're almost to 1,300 episodes on the podcast. We produce a daily show. Sometimes that's 5 or 7 days a week. And you just can't increase your frequency and your consistency when you're trying to go for just super high production value. I've seen B2B brands that I know, that I think very highly of, and they've tried to go out of the gates with this very high video production value along with their podcast, and it's just not sustainable because it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. It also takes a lot of investment, and if you're not seeing return on that because your video or your podcast, whatever the show is very top of funnel. It's for brand awareness. It's not something that like you launch a show and boom, 30 days later, you've got, 50 leads and 3 closed deals and all those sorts of things. It is top of funnel. So you've got to think about, how do we balance quality that is good with consistency and sustainability? So that's where I see people go wrong. Is I'm as creative as the next person. We have some amazing creative people just like yourself here on the Sweetfish team that loves good quality, but you've got to balance that. How much can we do with the aesthetic, and how can we stay consistent and just deliver good content no matter what format it's in?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the consistency is key, and I think that's really important. You mentioned earlier some alternatives to audiograms. Sometimes people are scrolling through social media. They might not want to stop and listen to a full audiogram, but they might want to stop and watch maybe a video. So we talked a little bit about long form versus short form video production. And let's talk about long form first and what the benefits are there.
Yeah. So as I was talking about before, a lot of people think about this. They think about the full interview, multiple camera angles, custom intro, all this sort of stuff. And it takes a lot to build and sustain that. And so what we recommend is, even for a lot of our customers that aren't recording their podcasts in studio, they're recording via Zoom or another video conferencing software, record that video. Go ahead and record it along with the audio. And you can use that full length interview for YouTube. And there are some ways, I've heard from some of the guys on Noah Kagan's team that there are some ways to kind of hack the system to grow your YouTube channel. For instance, looking at videos that do have a lot of views and are similar in content and looking at those tags and then tagging your video in a similar way. What I would recommend though is create a custom intro and outro that you can reuse, kind of like we do with podcasts, right? We, during the launch phase of a new show, we develop the intro and outro scripts, and you might change those up occasionally so that they don't get stale, but don't think that you have to have this amazing custom, intro and outro for every single video. And it has to be like Tonight Show quality, just something there. And then just have pretty much the raw video there in the middle to give people a full length video option if they are more of a video watcher than an audio listener, but you're not dumping a ton of production time and cost into it, so that you do have that option for folks. And then you can link to your YouTube channel in the show notes of your podcast. The more important thing, I think, is to make sure that you have some sort of thumbnail because YouTube will just auto generate, that part of the thumbnail. And you can't see me on video right now, but it might be kind of that awkward face where you're in between saying something, right? That gets served up as that thumbnail unless you submit a thumbnail with the episode number. And that can be just as easy as creating an episode graphic for, like we do for most of our customers for their podcast, for their blog. Just make that thumbnail creation part of your workflow. And so those are some of the things where you can stay consistent, you can have a video option, and you can always grow it from there. If you want to then, set up a camera next to, off angle from your webcam so that you can do some things like a studio, even though you're recording remotely, which pretty much everyone is doing these days. And we highly recommend, even, outside of a health pandemic keeping us all at home, most of the podcasts we produce do really well by scaling their interviews and doing them remotely. So there's things you can do with the long form video to make it sustainable and then just kind of increase the quality and iterate over time. So that's kind of how I see long form. I think there's some really fun things you can do with short form video as well. But those are my thoughts on kind of option one, long form video for your show or for your podcast.
Yeah, I love the idea of a long form video. And those are my favorite kinds to watch a lot of the times. But what would you say, you mentioned short form, and what would you say are the benefits of short form and how would you utilize that?
Yeah. So as we were talking about before, oftentimes when you're scrolling, kind of the difference between audio consumption oftentimes and text and video is on social. When people are scrolling, they're pretty active in their content consumption versus part of the reason that people tune into podcasts longer and listen to more episodes and listen to a greater percentage of each episode that they start is because they're often in passive consumption mode, right? They might be mowing the yard or shoveling the driveway if you're out here in Colorado like me, or you're walking the dog or driving. I know we're doing less of that. Maybe you're doing the dishes, right? Something like that right now. And so when people are scrolling on social, if you try and just meet them with audio only, it's kind of this disconnect. And that's where I see a lot of people, they hit play on that audiogram and they're like, oh, I thought this was a video. And they keep scrolling. I know I've done that. Not to say that those can't be somewhat effective. We've just found that there's a better way. So if people are scrolling social and you want to have them find your podcast, meet them where they are with something that meets their active consumption needs. So here, I wouldn't recommend taking that long form, full length, 25-minute interview and just posting it to LinkedIn. But what you can do is identify a 30 to 90 second clip out of that interview and that's very punchy, that says something intriguing. And at the end of that video, have the call to action be to subscribe to the podcast. So you're almost using it as a way to advertise the podcast, plus to give some sort of little nugget of content that people can get some value out of, as opposed to just, hey, check out our podcast. Please subscribe. Please check out episode 25, right? Take a nugget and deliver it to people when they're in that sort of content consumption mode. Now, some of the things that we recommend here is whether you're recording it remotely with a webcam via Zoom or you have a videographer on site. Obviously, people are leaning more these days into option number one. The same sort of things work whether it's on-site video or remotely recorded. Put a big branded frame around it so that your color scheme and the branding of your show is in front of people and more recognizable. Put a headline up top that's intriguing so that they know what the video is about, just like they would know what the headline of your podcast is that makes them want to click play when they're in their podcast player. Captions are huge. There's some ways to auto-generate those, but if you do them custom in your own format with a big progress bar and graphics that pop up, like if someone's saying like, I did an interview for the B2B sales show where Rex Biberston was talking about sales reps taking their headset off and slamming it on the floor. And so at that point in the video, we popped up a little image of the Hulk, right? Who doesn't love a little Avengers in their day? Am I right, Leslie?
Right.
So those sorts of things you can do, whether it's remote or on-site video, to optimize it for social and have that call to action be for them to subscribe. And we've seen some great results with that versus audiograms or just posting your episode graphic to social, again, to meet people where they are with the sort of content that they're looking for, optimized for that channel, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and be able to push them to a podcast that they might not know about and want to consume when they're in that mode of, hey, I want to listen to a full 30-minute interview.
Yeah. Logan, I think what's so great about this is that really anyone with a webcam can do these kinds of videos. You don't need, this huge Tonight Show production. You can just meet the active consumption needs of your audience where they are. And I love that idea. So, we've seen a ton of really great traction with video, not only in our organization here at Sweetfish, but with a lot of our clients as well. And do you mind just sharing just a couple of results that we've seen firsthand from video alone?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about YouTube, we talked about social. The other thing where you can use these video assets is on your blog. Ethan Butte, who is the co-host of the CX series here on B2B Growth, we produce a podcast for him and his team called the Customer Experience Podcast. And every episode has an accompanying blog post. And within that blog post, there are short 1 to 2 minute snippet videos there as well. And what you're leaning on there is when people find that blog post, and they're scrolling and they click play and they let that video play, even if they don't play the full minute and a half, but they listen to 30 seconds, that's increasing their time on page and therefore is boosting the SEO of that blog post that's associated with your podcast. So it's driving more web traffic, it's driving more visibility to your website, and it's also driving more visibility to your podcast because within that blog post, in addition to these snippet videos and just great written content, you should have calls to action throughout, maybe an email capture option so that they can get an email roundup every week or every month about your podcast. So it can be some lead generation, some lead capture as well as benefiting your SEO efforts. The other thing we've seen is just visibility of those videos on social. We're always big proponents of pushing out written and video content on LinkedIn through personal profiles, the host of your podcast. We've diverted from that a little bit with some of our collective shows, the B2B Sales Show and Crafting Culture. We have been pushing those out through what are essentially company pages, but they're show pages for the podcast. And because of the way those videos are optimized with the branded frame, the progress bar, the captions, we're seeing thousands of views on those videos, even though they're not going out through a personal profile, which would probably even be able to get more reach on it. So, those are all sorts of different impacts that we're seeing between customers and different Sweetfish podcasts to give people an idea of how they can use these videos and what sort of results that we're seeing. So I just want to encourage people, you don't have to have a huge studio. You don't have to have a lit stage or anything like that to use video effectively with your podcast if you use kind of some of these strategies that we've been playing around with. And for the longest time, when people said, hey, do you do video with the podcast you produce? I'm like, no, we're just audio only. We want to focus there, but we've been experimenting little by little with different types of video and different ways to incorporate that with the podcast strategy. And so hopefully people can learn from some of those lessons that we've been taking on the nose. And big kudos to Jeremy Wellman, our senior videographer here at Sweetfish, who's been leading the charge, not only creating great videos, but building out our video department, building out a lot of processes to be able to do it consistently. Because that is the next thing for like those short form videos. You need to have a process. Who's going to identify the snippet? Who's going to do the graphic design? Do the captions, and then who's going to do the video post-production. So you want to kind of create process around that and delegate the different aspects of it as much as you can.
Absolutely. And, I love this insight, Logan. I think that video is booming right now. And it's, especially in this digital age with what's going on in the world, I think that video is an awesome asset to have. I love this insight that you've provided. Thank you so much for talking to me about this today. I know this information is going to resonate really well with a lot of people. And if anybody isn't connected with you, how can they reach you?
Absolutely. Just look me up on LinkedIn, Logan Lyles. Last name is Lyles. Always open to connect with folks. Let me know that you listen to the podcast. That always just warms my heart. You can also send me an email, logan@sweetfishmedia.com. Always happy to talk marketing or podcasting in general. Hit me up there and more than happy to connect. Really appreciate everybody listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.